Grade 11, choice 2, first half. Ma'am, was the first half?
There's nothing like
half hour.
putting two classes against each other. It's so great.
First 24th of June. 24th of June.
Okay, right, go ahead.
Action.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. Hi. Who's this? Who's G?
Who's G?
G.
Who's there? Who's missing? Izzy? Is that Natalie? Ethan? Katie?
Right, go. Okay. All right. You need to relax. I don't want to see any note taking. You've got to listen to this. Okay. So, in the trick, in the section on reproduction, one of the things that's in aim 3. So aim 3 is work that you, in theory, can't get examined directly on unless they give you information about it. Okay. One of the things in aim 3 in the section on reproduction is fetal alcohol syndrome, FAS, and there's never time in grade 12 to do it. What, love?
Izzy. Hello.
Not in bio, Isabella.
Is no one there? Oh, man, did you open up the Google Meet?
I did.
She said you opened up the Google Meet.
Okay, I'll try again.
No one's on it.
I'm on it.
She's on it. She says no, you're not.
Nothing will give me more pleasure than to cut that child off in the Google Meet, let me tell you. She bunked her job.
They say you bunked your job. You bunked your job.
Tell Izzy for me and I tried.
She's trying to fix it now.
Who's trying to fix it?
Man, you're not 5.
What?
This is funny.
I can act like I'm 5. That's a really nice thing about being old, is you don't care about anything
That
anymore.
is very true, yeah.
You don't
For a
care.
second I thought you had blue hair. Because just like touching the top of it, I'm like, oh, you got blue highlights.
Get out.
Ma'am, I wouldn't say anything. My mother literally mistake bright purple for brown.
Hi, ma'am.
Hello, you ghastly child. How are you?
Ma'am, do you want to see my fatty?
What?
I got my wisdom taken out.
Because you've got flat cheeks. Like chipmunk cheeks.
It's not me.
You wouldn't recognize me if I wasn't me. You would go, what happened to our page? Okay, right, going.
Wait, so
Okay.
now, are we just like stopping with this stuff for now and going on to that and then
Because we finished that.
finish up?
But you skipped it.
So we finished the brain.
What? Where was I? Hold on.
I don't know.
Wow.
They were sleeping.
We got to the right now. The next thing we have to do is a spinal cord. Okay.
Okay, so just remind me next lesson that I do need to show you 2 videos. Okay, not tomorrow's lesson because I do know you've got a test. But while we're still on the brain, this part is in aim 3 in human reproduction, but it refers to the brain, and so I'm going to do it now while the brain is fresh in your little brains. Okay, all right. So this is in your SAGs, it is referred to as FAS, which is a bit of an old-fashioned term, and a more accurate and more recent term is FASD, and I'll explain the difference between them. So FASD is fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, and basically this goes, if a mother drinks while pregnant, this is what happens to the baby. Okay, that's what we're dealing with. Okay, So, alcohol use during pregnancy can result in a wide range of effects, including pregnancy complications, pregnancy loss, in other words, miscarriages, birth defects in the babies, and then when the babies are born, lifelong learning and behavioral problems. And FAS is a much narrower thing than FASD. Okay? FAS, or fetal alcohol syndrome. And I'll explain fetal alcohol syndrome just now. Collectively, all of these things are referred to as fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, or FASD. Okay, you happy? You know what I'm talking about. Okay, right. Way back in the day, the term fetal alcohol syndrome, or FAS, was not used until 1973. That was the first time that somebody actually gave it a name. However, even before that, for many years before that, people realized that if mothers drank alcohol while pregnant, there were certain very specific things that happened in the babies. And in fact, historically, in 1899, this guy, Dr. Sullivan, did a study in Liverpool in the prison, and what he looked at was, he looked at a group of women who were prisoners and pregnant and drank alcohol while pregnant, and he compared the outcomes with a group of women who were relatives of these ones, not in prison, didn't drink alcohol, pregnant, what happened with their kids. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Group of women in prison who were pregnant and drank, their relatives who were women outside of prison didn't drink, but also were pregnant. And he looked at what happened with the children in those two. Now, statistically, it's not, no. Scientifically, there are a few things that are not scientifically conclusive here. Because if you taken a group of women who drank alcohol and were pregnant, and their relatives who were didn't drink alcohol but were pregnant, it might have been a more conclusive study. Because realize that women in prison might have been badly treated, they might not have got good food, nutritious food, etc., etc. And so there are those criticisms of his particular study. Do you understand that? Yeah.
Yes.
Good. Okay. All right. And he found that the rate of stillborn births, in other words, babies that were born dead, and babies that died soon after birth, was nearly double between his group of women in prison who drank and the group of women outside of prison who didn't drink. Okay? Since then, many studies have been done that conclusively confirm that alcohol use during pregnancy can result in very characteristic physical, cognitive, that means thinking, and behavioral abnormalities in offspring. Okay, so this is specifically FAS, which remember is the very much narrower than FASD. Okay, you happy with that? Okay. It's a very specific but variable constellation of abnormalities seen in certain offspring who've had prenatal exposure to high levels of alcohol. And I'm going to go through the features with you. Okay, firstly, microcephaly. Okay, and that means that the cranium is smaller than normal. Generally, it's narrower than normal. And what does that mean? It means that the brain's not as big as it should be. If the cranium's not as big as it should be, then the brain's not as big as it should be. Do you understand that? Okay. Short palpable fissures. And that means the distance between the inner corner of the eye and the outer corner of the eye is small. Smaller than it should be. Okay? So the eyes, because the iris relative to the outside part of the eye looks really big, it looks as if they've actually got big eyes, but they haven't. Their eyes are smaller than normal. Okay. A flat mid-face. Okay. So here, across the cheekbones, flatter than normal. An indistinct philtrum. You know what a philtrum is? It's those two lines there. Yeah, those two ridges on the upper lip. Okay. And you know that because of the two ridges on the upper lip, you've got a Cupid's bow. Yes, Mrs. Page. Okay, so that's a Cupid's bow. Why do you have a Cupid's bow? Because you've got those two ridges there. Okay, so if that's flat, then the lip doesn't have a Cupid's bow. Does that make sense? Yes, Mrs. Page, makes perfect sense. Good. Okay, thin upper lip. Micrognathia. What does micro mean? What does gnathia mean? Jaw. Jaw! How's that a nose?
Yes. Thank you.
The label line goes to the lower jaw.
I can see the label line.
Don't blame me. Okay. Right, a short nose. So in other words, a huge distance here between the bottom of the nose and the top of the mouth. Exacerbated, obviously, by having a thin upper lip. Okay?
I wasn't wrong because it had something to do with the nose.
Lower jaw! Totally irrelevant.
Different labels, yes.
I'm listening, love.
Ma'am, can this disorder be the reason for Down syndrome and stuff, or is it two
No.
different things?
Two completely different things. Okay. Minor ear abnormalities, including small pinny. That means these things. Okay. A low nasal bridge. And a nasal bridge is this part of the nose here on which you put glasses. Okay. It's flat. If you drew somebody from the side, you would draw forehead and then the nose, and that part there is the nasal bridge. It's very low, it's very flat. So they would have problems wearing glasses. Okay, and what are called epicanthal folds. Now you need to listen carefully when I explain epicanthal folds. It's going to be relevant to something in matric. An epicanthal fold is a little fold on the inner corner of the eye and sometimes the outer corner of the eye as well. All Asian people genetically have an epicanthal fold. However, people who have fetal alcohol syndrome tend to have an epicanthal fold, even though they don't have the genetics for it and they're not of Asian origin. So the fact that people of Asian origin also have an epicanthal fold is unrelated to this thing. Okay. All right, so in the United States, it's a benefit to actually be diagnosed as having FAS, having an actual diagnosis, because if a person does, then they get a teaching assistant in class with them. So while they're at school, they've got somebody who sits at a table next to them and reads their work to them and explains their work to them extra and helps them with their problems in class and that kind of thing. So it's of benefit to actually be diagnosed. Somebody clap Emma. I know she's my chief switcher off of heaters, but she's also my chief phone user today. Sorry, my angel. Okay. All right. So what this person is, they think that she might have it, and they're comparing her with a series of photographs where they're going, she's as bad as this one, or she's not as bad as that, but she looks like this one. Then there's degrees of how developed it is. Okay. So this child has got it. Looks perfectly normal until you look at the things. Okay, so look, no philtrum, thin upper lip, short nose, low bridge, short palpable fissures. Okay, so then you can see, you can put all those parts together and realize, yeah, it's actually that. Okay, skip that. So here you've got an epicanthal fold on the inner and outer corner. There's an epicanthal fold on the inner but not the outer. Okay, but look at these lips. Short nose, thin upper lip, smooth philtrum. Short nose, Basically not a very well developed philtrum, but a thicker upper lip than this child. But look at the micrognathia, which has got nothing to do with said nose and everything to do with little narrow chin. Okay, can you see it? Okay.
Now, is there a way, because maybe some people just have genetically
Absolutely.
these things.
Absolutely.
But is
So-
there a way, what I'm asking is there a way to diagnose it other than by looking at the features?
They're meant to get a history of prenatal exposure to alcohol.
And what if the parents lie about it?
That's the issue.
Because I don't...
So in the United States, when they're trying to diagnose a child who would get the benefit of actually have a teaching assistant, the mothers won't admit to it.
Yeah, because it's not something that you would be proud of. It's something that you would be
No.
ashamed of, surely.
And many of the mothers give their kids up for adoption. So if there's no link to who the mother actually was, they can't get the history.
Yeah.
And then the child is never diagnosed, and then the child actually doesn't get the help that they should get.
So there's no way other than like looking at the features and speaking to the mother of the child?
Not to get, in certain states in the United States, not to get a conclusive diagnosis.
Okay.
But you can look at them and you can say that.
Yeah.
I've got a friend who's got an adopted child who, when I went to the States and studied this, I suddenly went, I know exactly what is wrong with that child, who's now like 30 and has given Catherine endless trouble all those years. And I realised that his mother actually must have drunk. Are you rocking in that chair, Jessie?
No.
Good. Okay. So here you can see all the features. Look, narrow head, although it looks pretty high, so you think, oh, awesome, big brain, but look how narrow it is. Okay, short palpable fissures, little low down pinny, short nose, smooth philtrum, thin upper lip. This child here looks perfectly normal until you look at the palpable fissures and the short nose and the smooth philtrum. Okay.
In that case, would we be given a photo like of two children?
No.
So what would we do with this?
It's a little bit, it's to do with reproduction.
Okay.
In the matric syllabus, it's one of the things over and above with reproduction. So just like they could give you information about HIV and ask you questions about HIV and the effect on children, they could give you, in theory, information on this. The reason why I'm doing this is because you've just done the brain.
Yeah.
And also because I think it's important that you know this. And also because I think it's very, very interesting. Because look at this. This is a brain of a child who died. Normal. It's obviously been preserved. That's why it's that funny colour. Same age child who died with FAS. Okay. Now look at the difference.
You can see it like
You can see it's much smaller.
And how smooth
How smooth the fissures and whatever. You can see there are no fissures here. Look at that.
So if if one side is smooth and the other side is like foldy and stuff, then like what happens? Like can they not use that side of their brain?
Well, there would be certain things at this child's. If this was perfectly normal,
yeah.
but it's not. Look, it's much smaller.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's also
But-
abnormally shaped.
But then like
Yes.
that's
So
not-
yeah, there would be certain things that this
so
could
then would they be,
overcome
like,
that.
creative still.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's still not, it's not perfect, eh? All right. So if you look at this, this is for comparison, a normal brain. And these are two individuals who had FAS. Now look how big the frontal lobe is in this normal individual. And if you put something here, it would go straight up vertically. Whereas this slopes and that slopes. So that shows you smaller frontal, also small frontal, and this has got a much bigger frontal region. And remember, the frontal region is the part that does judgment, willpower, cognition, etc., etc., etc. Okay. So impaired ability to plan, organize, sequence, and think abstractly. To the extent, there's a classic book about a guy who actually adopted a child, who he only realized when the child was about 16 that the child had fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And he writes in this book about how he spent all these years, every single day, teaching his child to tie his shoelaces. And every day he thought he had won the battle, and tomorrow, child didn't know how to tie his shoelaces. Every single day, the child didn't know how to get dressed. So you have a logical order to getting dressed. You don't try and put your shoes on and then try and put your socks on. You don't put your panties on after you've put your trousers on. And this kid, it didn't matter how many times the father explained and laid everything out on the bed in that particular sequence, this child could just not get it. Okay. Sorry? No. Okay. Ability to judge, inability to judge, so poor judgment of all sorts of things. Is this an appropriate behavior? Yes, no, etc. Poor problem solving and poor reasoning. Slower and less efficient processing of information. This is a normal brain, corpus callosum, little bit. No corpus callosum at all. Okay. Right, so what actually affects this whole thing? When the mother drinks relative to the age of the baby. So here you can see the central nervous system develops from week 3 to week 16. So if the mother drank during that time, there's more chance that the central nervous system would be affected. Okay, etc., etc. Okay. Frequency of prenatal exposure to alcohol. So if a mother drinks like every day versus once a week, more likely to happen with the everyday. Amount, which is actually volume of alcohol consumed per bout. The mother's health status. If the mother's in poor health, then it's more likely to affect a child. Genetic makeup of the mother and the fetus. This is fascinating, the number of kids she's already had. So if the mother drinks exactly the same way in her first child and her fourth child, the fourth child would be worse off. They don't know. Okay. The mother's age. The older she is, the worse it gets. So if she does this age 21 and exactly the same way, age 40, it's worse then. Okay. So really, really bad problems at school, attention deficits, potential academic ceiling, developmental delays with speaking, with toilet training, learning disabilities, etc. Okay, can't plan, can't organize sequence, etc. Ability to maintain attention is poor. Motor control, movement coordination is poor. Okay, mental health issues for life. Psychosocial behavior, anxiety, poor social skills. And then just some really interesting stats. 10 in 1,000 people in the United States. 4 areas in Gauteng in 2003, which is apparently when you guys were born.
Yeah.
I didn't know that when I did this. It's just the other class told me. 22 7-year-old children out of the 850 examined had FASD. Do you see how much higher this is than that? One study done in the Western Cape, between 40 and 46.4 children per 1,000 affected. Another study, 25 in 1,000 7-year-old children tested in Soweto had a severe form of the syndrome. And this is problematic because this is quite often where the lawbreakers come from. Because they're people who don't have a good understanding of right and wrong. Okay. And very often it's not something that you can teach them or reason about it. Okay. Please don't get obsessive about tomorrow's test. I've got kids who are going, I'm going to learn last year's notes that we took in class.